Good morning, everybody. So nice to see you. Take a seat. Day 2 of TDDC20. That is the hashtag that you can use whenever you are talking to people. Welcome. It's great to see you. I was asked on day 1, where are all the names? Where are the names of the people who are speaking? How do I know who that great keynote is? How do I send them an email and congratulate them? How do I tweet about them? Well, you actually have to use the online app, because the online app will introduce you to who the speakers are. So it's all there, it's all digital. How appropriate for this conference. Let me show you. Where are we? Okay, this is how you connect. And then this, once you connect, is what you see. You press on the speakers, you can see the speakers, you see their biographies. It's all there for you. Outside, you may well have seen an autonomous mini shuttle bus. That shuttle bus is going to be there for you. It's not just here any day, it's here for you to see. You can go inside, you can have a look. Mike is waiting for you. I said to Mike this morning, Mike, how long are you going to be in the shuttle bus? He said to about 3 p.m. So you have got time between now and 3 p.m. just to pop in and look to see what a mini autonomous shuttle bus looks like. It is hard to do a conference on a Friday, but it's not going to be hard for us. Turn to your right and say hello, good morning, shake the person's hand. You are so good at that. Let's try the other side. Turn to the person on your left, shake their hand. Shake the hand of the person behind. We are ready now. The power of connection. We have so much to do. There is so much we have to do in terms of transportation, mobility, the SDGs, climate action. Oh my goodness, I need Andrew Steer up here straight away. He is our keynote for this morning. He is going to surf your energy. We are talking about climate action and transport. Andrew Steer, President and CEO of the World Resources Institute. The audience are energized, Andrew. Good morning.
Thank you, Femi. On a cold Friday morning, Femi speaks and we all feel warm and we feel enthusiastic and we are on our way. Welcome to day 2. It is a great honor for the World Resources Institute to work with the World Bank. Thank you, Guang. This is our 17th year. Thank you, Annie, who leads our city and transport work. My goodness. So it doesn't seem like there's global warming this morning, but there really is, and that's what we're going to be talking about for the coming minutes. And then we're going to have a fabulous panel of real practitioners. You don't need to be told that we've just left the warmest decade in recorded history. 3 days ago, we got the results for 2019. It was the second warmest year in recorded history, and we know why. Don't think anyone in this room needs to be persuaded that the science is right. 99.5% of scientists would agree that climate change is real, caused by humans, and if we don't do something about it, we're in deep trouble. And the reason is obvious. We don't only have warmer temperatures, and it's happening today. We also have stronger storms. We've got a huge amount of evidence over the last decade. We have rising seas. We have fiercer fires. Look at Australia now. Look at California. Over the whole world in the last decade, we've had fires like we never had before. Shifting rainfall patterns can be more flooding, or it can be droughts. So too we have the acidification and the warming of the ocean, leading to at least 70% of loss of all coral reefs, and if we actually have temperatures rising by 2 degrees Celsius, it will be over 90% loss of coral reefs. If you read the Bible, it talks about the earth groaning. That's what's starting to happen right now. And of course, as in this building, you've done some of the best research in the world, it is the poorest that are the most affected. And of course, they have done the least about the problem. So we're not going to talk a whole lot more about climate change. If anybody feels we need to know more about it at this stage, we can do it later on. But we want to talk really about solutions. Where are we heading? These are the emissions today per year. This is where we need to be in 2030 if we are to have any chance of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. In terms of all the plans now under the Paris Agreement, this is where we will be in 2030. A disastrous situation, and this is if we are successful at achieving what countries have said they will achieve during the 2020s. And by the way, for 2050, we need to be here. We need to decarbonize. And of course, what we're talking about this morning is the role of transportation in that position. So the question is, will the transport sector deliver? Now, today, the transport sector is emits about 14% of total greenhouse gases. And of course, that is rising, not only because transportation is rising more rapidly than other sectors, but because some other sectors, especially power, are actually making a lot more progress. So the role of transport is becoming more difficult to deal with. And you can see there, if you've got good eyesight, there's vehicles at the top, relatively easy to address. Requires a lot more political leadership than we have today. The ones at the bottom are what we call hard to abate. So roughly speaking, everybody in the world, on average, emits about 1 ton of carbon because of transportation. In this room, I would guess that on average, we emit between 7 and 15 tons per person. So we are not only the solution, we are also the guilty ones in this room. Fly to Europe, there's a ton, so to speak. Have two automobiles in the garage, that's another ton. If your kids go to school in a car, there you go. So we have a lot to do, both as leading policy players, investors, and also as human beings. So transport faces, obviously, I'm not here to say the role of transport is solely to worry about climate change, not at all. But addressing climate change will also have, as you know, all kinds of remarkable co-benefits. Our transport systems today are leading to 1.35 million people. I know Guang Yu yesterday spoke about this very eloquently. So too, because we've designed cities for cars and not for people, we're losing up to 10% of GDP, shocking waste. So too, air pollution gave premature deaths to 7 million people last year. Transport plays an important role. Doing climate action right will help on all of these, and doing these right will help on climate change. Amazing synergies that exist. And obviously, as everyone in this room knows extremely well, we have more than a tripling of vehicle or transport miles before the turn of the century. Okay, so we need to do 3 things. This won't come as remarkable to you. First, we need to electrify. Second, we need to design our cities differently. And third, we need to address the so-called hard-to-abate sectors. And we're going to address all of these in the panel we're about to have. So let's talk about them one by one briefly. Electrification. Today, about 20 million electric cars on the road. These are 2 different projections, somewhere between 130 million and 250 million is the estimate by 2025. So massive increase, still a relatively small share. The interesting point to make is that take the average of that. Let's say there will be 200 million EVs by 2030. If you simply take their battery power, that will be 10 times as much as the IEA and Bloomberg New Energy Finance estimates is needed for storage globally. So there's an incredible co-benefit here. You know, people will tell you, oh, we can't move to 100% renewables. Why? Because we don't have the base load and we don't have the storage. It's all very expensive. Actually, it's sitting in your garage. That is where the storage is going to be. So you're going to have this incredible two-way flow of electricity, and it's going to be quite remarkable. Everybody here knows renewables are getting dramatically cheaper. We can now demonstrate that even in those countries where they are investing in coal, such as Indonesia, major piece of work recently that shows that actually if you take domestic air pollution into account and if you bring in modern approaches to procurement, modern approaches to financial management, reforms to the financial system, actually renewables are cheaper. So this is a trend that is unstoppable, and the grid is obviously getting cheaper. This is something that's opening right now. This is the new Tesla mega battery plant in China. Tesla, as I'm sure you've seen, is just knocking on the door of a valuation of $100 billion, which is more than the total value of Ford and GM combined. So this revolution is unstoppable. And so too, it's not just cars. In this room, there are people that are devoting their professional lives right now to electrification of buses. I think everybody knows Shenzhen was the champion, so to speak. Amazing. And even as of today, 95% of the electric buses in the world are in China. If you look here, here's some projections to 2025. China still totally dominates. There are all kinds of interesting reasons why. Now, by the way, for Latin America and India and Europe would be, and the United States, roughly the same as those. Amazing the rate of growth in all those countries, but still how massively behind China we are expected to be in 2025. There's no reason why this should not continue. And a question to ask some of the European and the United States producers of buses who now are producing very efficient, modern, diesel-powered buses, why they are not pushing their electric buses more. It would be a good idea if they did, and maybe they need to be thinking more about the common good rather than the profitability in the shorter term. So that was the first one. Electrification is going to happen, needs to be accelerated, and people in this room are going to play a big role in it. Second, we need to build our cities differently. And again, this was a theme of last year's conference. We really need to think differently. After, how many 10,000 years of civilization, we still are sitting in traffic for 2 or 3 hours a day. We still are breathing air that's unhealthy. We still are killing people on the roads. Is that the highest calling for civilization? No, of course it's not. We could do much better than that. We do in other areas. The way we design our cities, pancake-like, spreading all over, so that we reach a tipping point that's negative, whereby you simply can't afford to build the infrastructure further and further out, and people are taking longer and longer. We could easily do better than that if we had the right kind of leadership. And it's wonderful to see people I see Min there from Jakarta and so on. Wonderful to see leading players in this room that are working precisely on that. Everybody's seen these kinds of charts where Pittsburgh and Stockholm have the same populations and yet 10 times as much emissions from Pittsburgh, and by the way, much less economic efficiency. And you can tell the same story from compare Atlanta with, say, Barcelona. We can do this time and time again. We know we can do better than Pittsburgh or Atlanta or Houston. So the other thing is, obviously, we just need to get more serious about public transportation. One of the really sad things is that whilst we now have great subway systems in principle in so many cities, sadly they're becoming overcrowded, they aren't getting the investment they need, and ridership in some cases is declining, and obviously that's not going to lead us where we need to get to. And in Africa as well, up to 95%, and Latin America, is still in informal minibuses, which is polluting, is dangerous, and so on. And the question is, where's the leadership in the world that's actually saying it's time to do differently? Think about economic reforms. Between 1985 and the year 2000, 150 countries radically changed their economic policies, liberalizing trade, privatizing, reforming banking systems, a transformation that's at least as big as is required now. The problem is we just don't have that kind of momentum. We don't have the kind of peer support groups that are getting us to just be more effective in all that we're trying to do. We've got some wonderful groups like C40 and ICLEI, and I think they're probably here today, but we really do need to ramp this up in a much more important way. Now, great progress. I think this is Nairobi. It doesn't tell you much just looking at this. This essentially using modern technology, GIS-linked technology, to dramatically improve the route system, the travel behavior of small micro transports. And so we are seeing real progress in some areas. And obviously, in this building, and certainly WRI and many of you understand that there is a new generation of walking and bicycling, and the rates of return are fantastic. I mean, look at this. This is a study that was done as part of the Coalition for Urban Transitions. You invest 530 billion. By 2030, you'll be getting almost that every single year as a return. So this is really good investment. So to rethinking street use, and you're familiar with this, complete streets, space-efficient modes, improving pedestrian safety, creating just a more joyful, more effective, more efficient and cleaner and less polluting city. This is all part of what is required to address the climate change challenge of transportation. And I know this also was a major theme last year, and you're discussing it this year too, the rise of new mobility services. And as we heard from Robin Chase last year, this could be wonderful in terms of making cities more effective and lower carbon, or it could be the opposite if we do it wrong. And that's why we need smart policy. And under NUMO, the New Mobility Organization, which we coordinate, it's a coalition of companies and cities and countries that are committed to finding the right policies to encourage the new mobility. This is an example of Pittsburgh, where they are doing a very good job on that. And finally, we should get serious about shifting demand. We should do what Sao Paulo is trying to do, doing some very innovative, both regulatory, fiscal, and subsidy approaches here. So that was the second imperative. The third imperative is the most difficult one, in many ways the most exciting in terms of technology: address freight and harder to abate sectors, and road freight, shipping, and aviation in particular. And it's worth remembering that actually heavy freight in cities is what causes most of the air pollution. I mean, this is a striking thing. Diesel trucks only account for 8% of vehicles, half of CO2, 78% of particulate matter, and 57% of NOx. So let's get it done, so to speak. We now have the technology to do it. Demand for freight obviously is growing, perhaps even more than for passenger vehicles. And the good news is this, and this is really a bit of a mini revolution that's happened just in the last year. The Energy Transitions Commission has done some really interesting work. For the last 20 years, we've been saying we know how to decarbonize power production, but there's this sort of hard to abate group, the cements, the steels, aviation, heavy transport. It's too difficult to do, it's too expensive. It turns out, actually, with new technologies, it's not too expensive. The estimate was about 1/3 of global GDP we could decarbonize by 2050 totally in rich countries, and 2060 in developing countries, and there would be lots of good co-benefits. And of course, there's all kinds of sort of software things that come into this as well. Low-hanging fruit, urban deliveries. Some of you in this room are working on these issues: real-time data, shipments to consolidate, delivering in off hours. All of these can help dramatically reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So a very big contribution. Truck electrification costs are decreasing. By 2024, we expect that actually it will be just as cheap over the lifetime to have an electric truck as a diesel truck. And again, you can see the remarkable rates of return in this that have been calculated, and I suspect some of you in this room are part of these calculations. So there is no reason for us not to make progress. And I should say that even in sort of areas like maritime, it's now can be seen that, you know, whether it's through machinery efficiency and wind, which will actually help reduce carbon emissions by 40%, or battery or fuel cell, obviously that will reduce by 100%, hydrogen or ammonia, fuel for engines can do 100% as well. And one of the really exciting things is next week, starting on Monday, is for 3 days from now, Davos, the 50th anniversary of Davos. In each of these areas, there is going to be a meeting of CEOs in the areas to discuss this decarbonization. So for maritime, for example, Maersk has made a commitment. There's going to be a session on that, CEOs sitting there. And so too on aviation, I'm going to be part of this. We now can demonstrate, and we're going to have some discussion of this a little bit later. Better traffic management can do a little, 15%. Aircraft design, another 14%. So too we can move towards biofuels, synfuels, hydrogen, battery, and so on. Now this is hard work, quite frankly. This is perhaps the most difficult one of all. But a meeting in Davos next week with some of the leading airlines, with some of the leading oil and gas companies, with some of the airports, the CEO of Heathrow, for example, the CEO of Shell will all be there discussing this. So this is pretty exciting stuff. So finally, a critical year ahead. And we need, as transport people, to be thinking about the political urgency of climate as a way of advancing our agenda more generally. We are going to be called to do a lot this year. Every 5 years, under the Paris deal, it will only work if ambition is raised. 5 years ago, in 2015, we had the Paris deal. 2020 is when countries need to come back. They're going to meet in Glasgow in November, and they are supposed to raise their level of ambition. And the question will be, to what extent is transport playing its role there? Not only do countries need to come up with long-term plans, they need to enhance their short-term, their 10-year plans. And transport needs to be much, much more engaged here. This is, if you ask how many NDCs, which is the commitment under the Paris deal at the country level, how many of them include transportation? A lot of them do. They all refer to it. Some of them have targets. Very few have ambitious targets, and very few have the how to get there in it. Our job should be to help countries raise their ambition, because if they move forward on this agenda, we will actually find that we're moving forward on other transport agendas at the same time. And so finally, the UN Climate Conference. Some of you in this room will certainly be there. What we need to do is have a coalition of like-minded campaigners and professionals on transport that are part of this journey. So let me stop there and urge you to see climate change is not a burden that needs to be addressed, but rather actually an opportunity to achieve some of the sort of leapfrogging that we've all been talking about in these conferences over the last 17 years. It's a very, very exciting agenda, and we look forward to working with you together. Thank you very much.
I just want to take a moment for a word to our sponsors, Ford Mobility and PTV Group. Transforming Transportation is in its 17th year. I met somebody yesterday who was part of some of the original Transforming Transportations, and I said, it must be like seeing your baby walk and talk and go to university and get a first degree. It's so much bigger now. There's so much that's packed into it. I'm hearing the feedback that's coming back from you about how beautifully organized it is, how many different elements there are that you can go and see. There are fireside talks, there are breakout sessions, incredible networking, important people here. You are the important people. And without Ford Mobility and PTV Group, none of this would be possible. I want to take a pause, and however you want to share your appreciation, you can do so. I think it may well be something that's an audible appreciation, but don't let me pressure you. Go ahead. Let's thank our sponsors. Someone at Ford Mobility and PTV Group are smiling right now. Thank you very much. We really, really, really appreciate you. This morning, climate action, climate change, and transport, that is our theme. If you are following on live.worldbank.org, if you have comments and questions, go ahead, type them in. The team back here will make sure they get onto the stage. They are curating them, so they need to be good, juicy, great questions. Other than that, love to have them in the conversation. We have 2 microphones in the room. When you hear the keynotes, make sure that you're listening really carefully, because I will ask you for some feedback. The gentleman that's closest to that microphone there, will you test it for me? Just stand up and say hello to us. Good morning. Yeah, one more time. Who are you?
Felipe, good morning.
Oh, hello, Felipe.
Hi.
Where are you from, Felipe?
From Chile.
Okay, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome, welcome. Thank you. That microphone works. Fantastic. We're going to have a keynote right now, so listen really carefully, because I will ask you for some feedback off the back of that. The Minister for Transport and Telecoms is going to stand right here. Thank you so much, Minister. Lovely to see you. Gloria Hutt is the Minister of Transport and Telecoms for Chile, and she will be doing the keynote speech. Minister, you're very welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you for this invitation. It's a great opportunity to share our experience and our view, and I appreciate very much the presentation that Andrew did and all the enthusiasm that he transmitted, and how it confirms the path that we have to follow. I want to clarify that I will refer mainly to urban transport in these opening remarks. And when I read the title of the session, Sustainable Growth Through Decarbonizing Transport and Mainstreaming Resilience, is a big lot of concepts to speak about. Sustainable growth, for example, or decarbonizing transport. Each of them could be the ground to develop concepts. What I want to remark especially here is that we are not just decarbonizing or just looking for sustainability. We are looking for the well-being of citizens, and that's the main focus that has inspired our public policy in Chile and the decisions that we are making, which includes electromobility as a focus. And I want to mention 5 elements of our public policy that, in our opinion, must be present. First is, as I said, the well-being of citizens. Every decision is analyzed in terms of the impact on people, on how they feel while using the city, while making trips, while they are making decisions about which mode is better, but in terms of feeling better, not just making them aware of their contribution to improving the environment, for example, because not all the people, by contrary of what we could expect, and from the theory, one could expect that everyone is aware and willing to contribute. It's not the reality. The reality is that people move according to their interest and their perception of well-being, and that's why we have that focus. Then we have environmental pressure. The country has committed objectives in the Paris Agreement. Our transport sector explains, as it was shown here, about 30% of GHG emissions. So we have a focus, and we have to reduce by 30% or even 40% the emissions by 2050. And we have a lot to do to achieve that objective. Then we have a big element of urban dynamics, and Andrew mentioned the need of approaching the urban development in a different way. In our view, is not just the different way of approaching the city development, is changing also the way that we allocate and prioritize the use of the existing space. When the resources are enough for everyone, then there is no need of setting some priorities or allocating the resources to one group or another. But when the resources are limited, then we have it's mandatory for the public transport authority or the authority in general to set the priorities. And the priorities have to be defined in terms of the general well-being. And that's why, for example, just to put a recent example, in Santiago de Chile, last week, we took one lane of one of the main streets in the city, and we are going to take it out from cars and allocate it for cycles and scooters, for example, and for micromobility. That kind of decision is necessary, in spite of some criticals, of course, car users. And what we have seen is that you can limit the circulation of cars, for example, or even you can install some public policy regulation like road pricing, but just pricing is not enough. Sometimes the cost of paying for use the road is affordable for many car users. The highest cost for a car user is not being able to enter in a place or not having a place to park the car, for example. So we are moving in that direction. The city is available for all, and we have to distribute the space in a more even way. We have also technology changes that allow us to improve the way we plan the trips. And I agree completely with the approach that Andrew presented here in terms of optimizing routes, for example, of delivering information to users, allowing people to plan their trips better. For example, promote the use of public transport because integrated tariff is possible, or electronic payment systems. So there are many elements of technology that allow us to make public transport more attractive. We also have some elements here of changing the business models to introduce more competition, more quality, and reduce the costs. We are now facing challenges in terms of limited resources in our economy due to recent events that many of you are aware. And we are planning to use the same budget to improve the system. And we have found, and this comes from the last year probably, that many elements of the business model that supported our public transport system had to change. We had private concessions, and those private concessions were allocated to private companies that owned, for example, the buses, the depot, and also had the right to operate in certain areas. Now we are moving to a different business model because we found that can make it more competitive, more efficient, and reduce the costs by bidding by separate the operation and taking the strategic assets in the hands of the public transport authority. This goes a little against the free market model, where PPP recommended to allocate all the elements to the private operator. We think that is the time for the public transport authority or the government to take a more active role in managing the public transport assets and the strategic assets of the system. So we are also working in new business models. What's the role of electromobility in all this equation? When is the time to change our public transport system? We took this chance because, as I said before, the well-being of people is what we are looking for. And we found that the acceptance and the willingness of people to use public transport increases with electric buses. Not just electric buses. Our public transport system was delivered in a very poor standard, with old buses not very well maintained as a consequence of the business model that was in operation. So we set as an objective to keep a very high share of public transport, is in the range of 45% of the motorized trips, which is very important. So if we keep that share, we are also going to protect the cities. What's the design behind that? Is that urban land is becoming every time more limited and more expensive. So houses will become smaller, and the new backyard is the public space. How we allocate and improve the public space for people, for non-motorized modes, for example, by compacting the trips. So we need to prioritize mass transit. And how we make attractive using mass transit by increasing the quality. So we decided to go for electric buses and for a very high standard that I will show in a video with air conditioning, with Wi-Fi, with the USB ports, and many of the elements that make attractive for people to use public transport. So what we are trying to achieve is well-being, using public transport, releasing public space of high quality to people and to non-motorized modes, and through that way we are trying to achieve the main objective of reducing emissions and, as I said, get happy citizens. I will show a video that describes the history, the short history of our electromobility in Santiago. Thank you.
Chile has almost 7 million inhabitants that travel through the city. To meet citizens' high expectations, Santiago's transport system supports the transformation to more efficient and sustainable mobility solutions. In particular, Santiago's transport system has moved towards electromobility. In 2017, the first pilot e-buses arrived to be tested in Santiago's street conditions. A crucial step was to include 100 new BYD e-buses in 2018 in a partnership with the energy provider NLX and bus operator Metbus, and to construct the required e-bus depots. In 2019, through a second partnership of energy provider Engie with bus operators STP and Bule, 100 Yutong e-buses arrived. Later, 183 new BYD buses were added to the system, which sums up to almost 400 electric buses in Santiago's streets at the end of 2019. The coordination by the government was a crucial element for the implementation of a business model where energy companies buy the e-buses. The government holds an operation contract with the bus companies. The bus companies signed a leasing contract for the operation of the buses with the energy company that owns the buses. Maintenance responsibilities vary depending on the specific agreements with the bus manufacturer. The energy companies constructed the e-bus depots that are necessary for the operation of the buses. This public-private partnership required commitment from all stakeholders and planning to transform old business models in the pursuit of sustainable mobility.
Comodidad más que nada también para el adulto mayor, no tiene torniquete, tiene una atención al público que esté inclina el bus para subir la silla de ruedas.
Han traído muchos beneficios y sobre todo para lo que es el cambio climático, son buses que contaminan mucho menos.
Yo lo encuentro más cómodo, fresquito, en el invierno da gusto por la calefacción que tiene calentito.
Yo tuve una capacitación de 2 meses en la Universidad de Chile, antes que llegaran los buses. Nos dieron un diploma, nos dieron todo eso.
Santiago has become a pioneer in electromobility, which offers important benefits. Savings in operational and maintenance costs of more than 60% make the operation of electric buses financially attractive, even considering the higher initial investment cost compared to traditional diesel buses. Overnight charging allows the buses to meet a city's typical operational needs of 240 to 300 kilometers a day. The absence of internal combustion engines reduces noise. Combined with elements such as Wi-Fi, USB chargers, and air conditioning, electric buses offer significant improvements in terms of comfort and user experience. The use of electric buses reduces emissions, including CO2, methane, and particulate matter. Moreover, the e-bus depots are supplied with renewable energy. Chile is a good example of electromobility in Latin America, moving fast towards sustainable mobility.
Minister Hartz, thank you very much. We really appreciated your keynote and your video. So we are going to be talking about climate action, climate change with transport, and we're going to start with the idea of mitigation. And I'm going to get our plenary speakers to introduce themselves. Marusha, go ahead.
Thanks very much, Femi. Thanks, everyone. Minister, that was impressive, as usual. Thanks a lot for that. Well, my name is Marusha Cardama. I run the SLOCAT Partnership, Sustainable Low Carbon Transport Partnership, an organization that's been out and about for a good 10 years trying to enable action and knowledge towards that new paradigm of mobility, and is consistent of more than 90 members from across a diversity of stakeholders. And why do I do this, Femi? Well, because I think that nowadays, more than ever, climate action is a matter of justice, of socio-economic justice. It's a matter of powering livelihoods within environmental limits. So I'm going to keep it there. Yeah? Shall I?
Perfect. Hello, Jane. Good morning. Tell the audience who you are.
Good morning. Good morning, Fanny. So I'm Jane Hopi. I'm the director in charge of the environmental program in ICAO. ICAO is the International Civil Aviation Organization. And my role in the organization is to facilitate action to make air transport more environmentally sustainable. And by that I mean we have to ensure that we have the right international, globally agreed standards, policies, programs, projects that allow that to happen. Big part of my role is as well, as our states are not in the same readiness level for the action, is to prepare them for action. So a big chunk of my work is also the capacity building for our states and our stakeholders to be ready to act.
Very nice to see you. When a country sends their deputy prime minister, you get a sense that this is an important issue because things are doing Luxembourg, deputy prime minister. Do tell the audience why you felt it was important to be in this conversation and a little bit about what you do.
So my name is François Bauge. I'm Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Mobility and Infrastructure in Luxembourg, and I started this job in 2013. And you must know that I started this job to take over this ministry in the most car-loving country in the world, beside of Qatar, because we have the highest degree of individual motorization in the world. And changing mentality and really trying to have a paradigm shift in such a country. Everybody told me in 2013, you're doing political suicide, and you will be not be there anymore in 2018. And I can assure you, it's not the case. If you have the political courage to really to go ahead, you can be re-elected, and had been re-elected in 2018. And that's really pleases me a lot, because I think that the mobility change and having a paradigm shift in the mobility sector, in our mobility behavior, coming away from the really inefficient way that we organize mobility in the last 50, 60, 70, 80 years is the biggest challenge for humanity in the 21st century, but it's a chance. It's a chance because if you have the courage to do it, you will see at the end we will not only have a better life, but also improve in our economy.
Very nice to have you. Barbara.
Well, my name is Barbara Lenz. I'm from DLR. DLR stands for German Aerospace Center, and everybody's wondering what is she doing with transportation, as it is aerospace. There is a big section inside DLR about transportation and energy, and well, DLR is very much technology-oriented in its overall research, but what is my institute, that is based in Berlin, in Germany, is contributing is the systemic view. And I appreciated very much, in particular your presentation, Gloria, because you were pointing out this systemic view that it is not only the technologies, but that it is the people, that it is regulation. You got a very nice word for it, setting priorities, much nicer than your regulation, but that as things goes hand in hand, this is the real contribution in the end to, well, a goal like mitigation represents.
Jane, is it really uncomfortable trying to have a climate action conversation and you're working in aviation?
Okay, to the spot. Yeah, aviation has been in the center of this discussion on the climate crisis. I think I think number one, everybody continues to be mesmerized with technology. And flying still for many, is kind of a miracle. How can you fly? It's not evident. We are not born to fly. We can run, but fly. And I think that, I don't think it's, well, it is uncomfortable in the sense that it's a good uncomfortable. I think it's time to get uncomfortable. I think it's time to shake up. I think it's time to respond to this new generation that, yes, it has to be possible for you if you are gearing to have a zero footprint to travel. It's the other way around. It's not, say, this generation that's now claiming for connectivity that you are not supposed to connect because you have a footprint if you do so. So I think we have a even bigger responsibility with the pressure that's coming towards us to deliver that faster. I think it's all about the ambition. I think it's all about finding solutions, be it connected with behavior, with big policies, but we are a technology-oriented sector, that's for sure. We love technology. We love technology. We fly. And because of that, we are very, very interested in not limiting any of the possibilities for future technologies that could come and respond with, to the claim for sustainability through technology. I think Andrew was as excited as possible, and I can be more excited than Andrew if we start talking about some of those technologies that are coming in. Yesterday, I was one of the first ones in the row looking at the drone panel because you can substitute entire services that today need to use an airplane with those drones, and you can have clean energy to do so. But make no mistake, we are looking at new technologies. It's much more difficult, so don't look at...
So Jane, we're going to ask you what those new technologies are in a moment, but while you were talking, Marusha was writing a note down. Marusha, what did you write down? Because there are no secret notes.
I was noting down responsibility. Do you really want to see my notes?
Yes.
You're going to get nightmares at night.
Be gentle with us.
No, I was noting down responsibility.
Right.
And I was actually thinking how policy and regulation can go about that, enabling that responsibility, isn't it? Andrew illustrated how such a critical year we're living in 2020 in terms of those global policies and how, for instance, nationally determined contributions and long-term strategies in the framework of the Paris Agreement are going to be essential for that. If those two big frameworks don't actually set the ambition at the right level in terms of transport measures, and if they don't set it in a balanced manner across the avoid, shift and improve framework, we are not going to really live up to that responsibility. Can I develop what I mean by that balanced approach, or are you going to get back to me later?
No.
Can I?
There's only now.
There's only now.
Yeah,
so, why do I mean by that balanced approach to the ASI framework? Perhaps it's balanced, but perhaps there's a bit of a bias. Perhaps it's about time we catalyze avoid and we look into the technical, the fiscal and the governance figures and measures that are needed there. Perhaps it's about time we emphasize shift and we really look into the way in we do so. And perhaps it's about time we broaden the discussion about improve, and we look into different vehicles. Let me give two very quick examples, really. I'm going to take 45 seconds to do these. When I mean emphasize and shift or broaden and improve. Broaden and improve different types of vehicles. 200 million electric bicycles in China compared to 5 million in the global fleet of electric vehicles. That has a huge impact on the renewable energy area and on the way we plan our cities. Emphasize and shift. Look at the new regulation in Cambridge, UK about urban access and how actually limiting vehicle access into the center of cities has actually helped flourish a panoply of actions in which freight companies are looking into delivering without motorized ways. So really, I think that responsibility goes hand in hand with the type of policy and the type of regulation we put out there.
Yeah, I want to come in here because it's clear that it's right what had been said, that humanity loves technology. But we must be aware that the problems that we have today in mobility, in general, the technology can be a tool to help us, it's clear, but it is not the solution. The solution is that you must understand that we must change completely the whole system. The whole system is inefficient today. Starting how we treat, for example, pedestrians and cyclists in the city, over the lack of investments that you have in the public transport, the really complete mistaken understanding that you have regarding cars. We organized the system of mobility in the last 60, 70 years, mainly based on an ideological vision that we had, with an economic background that was really to emphasize individual mobility, the cars. So we must really attack the whole system. There is no silver bullet to change it. There is not one solution. You must look at the whole system and develop a holistic approach.
Give us an example of what attacking the whole system means.
I give you one example. When you look at how we organized the infrastructures or built the infrastructures for mobility in the last 50, 60 years, regarding, for example, take the cars, the streets, the roads. Today, if a road is congested, for example, in the peak hours, we then enlarge the roads. We build from 3 to 4 lines or 6 lines, whatever. In the United States, it's often 9, 10 lines when you look at, for example, Los Angeles. But we don't think about how efficient we use this road. The aim must be to move people and not cars, for example. So if you have in the peak hour a road that is congested and in every car is only one person sitting one person in the peak hours, and you have 5 places in the car, that makes no sense to enlarge the street, because then you enlarge the congestion only. So it's really the system that is not good, and we must think about the efficiency of the system and really understand that you must combine all modes of transport that you have in our society. So from pedestrian to the car, it's also wrong to diabolize, for example, the cars. But you must understand that you must use the car completely in a different way that we had used the car in the last 60, 70 years. It's a combination that will bring us the solution. And then, so you must build up your strategy on this holistic approach, on this holistic vision.
Well, I agree, but at the same time, I think this is still a quite technical solution. It is, again, a technical optimization of a system, and it leaves out in some way the people there. I might give you an example. Before the TT conference, there was a TRB, which is Transportation Conference, and one person showed for the UK that they need, by 2030, they need to have a modal share of only 50% of not only, but of 50% non-car. They need a reduction of vehicle miles traveled by 17%, and they need to have a dramatic increase in carbon-free vehicles. And all this is not technology, it is people who do that. And the challenge that we have to make people being satisfied with what is going on, and also to be able, economically be able, is so huge, given that it has to be done by 2030, which is tomorrow. So this is a very important point, and I'm very happy that we are talking here not only about technologies that are extremely important to get to the goal, but also about regulation, or I still may repeat, setting priorities. I love it, really.
But really, it's regulation.
Will not go out without this. We cannot, for the last 50 years, we have always thought that when we improve the system, when we improve technologies, people will react in a positive way. But the fact is that we have so many rebound effects that people react in a positive way, but they are traveling more instead of traveling more sustainable. So, well,
see, Barbara, when the DPM said tech is not the solution, you pulled a face like that.
Tech is not a solution, but we cannot make it without technologies.
Right.
We will not be able to do it without new technologies, without clean technologies. So it's always the combination between technologies and behavior.
If I may. So I fully agree, and I think all of us are looking at the issue with the same elements. I would just caution something. It's the current understanding and of the situation as we see, and the different realities. I'll go back, Fanny, to the panel yesterday with the drones, where you clearly saw 2 developing countries telling how much that have improved their lives and how they are using that. And for the other speakers that were from developed countries that were looking at it, they were completely shocked and worried how would that then fit into the actions that we have already taken. So imagining that there will be a response to everything that, that is the right response, I would caution. Again, in terms of regulation, you also regulate technology. So, guys, next time you take a plane, you're getting into more than 12,000 internationally agreed standards. We have 193 member states in ICAO, 80 international organizations. We have to consult them in each of those standards twice. So it's a big issue to get to an agreement like that. For us to get to a global agreement, and again, it's not only technology, it's behavior. So we have now a global scheme because we did not have the technology to respond to our objective on the carbon neutral growth 2020, which is this year. So we had to complement because technology didn't give us all the answers to get there. So we had to put a global scheme for offsetting. And you have to have the agreement, and you have to train everybody to do that. And, it's not one fits all. Right now we are looking into technology, sustainable fuels. We are flying with used cook oil. Who imagine? You might be flying with used cooking oil without knowing.
Used cooking oil.
Yes.
Which airline is putting cooking oil in their engine? You need to tell us. I'm writing it down. I'm not taking them.
I will ask you to go to your websites now. Go to the ICAO website, www.icao.int. Go to sustainable fuels. You have a map, live map, of all the flights that are happening right now.
Can you do
and
that
you can follow them, and you can see which ones are flying with sustainable fuels.
Say that slowly, and we're going to put that up behind us.
www.icao.int.
ICAO?
ICAO, International Civil Aviation Organization.
Yes.
.int from international.
.int.
Yeah, and then there we have a map, the world map. That you have to go to sustainable fuels, please. Environment, sustainable fuels, and then there is a map, and we have more than 200,000 flights, commercial flights.
This is so fantastic.
We have 4 paths of fuel certified. You can do fuel from
You're demanding that you're in this conversation.
Yes,
Go ahead.
This is a very, very active discussion. I love this discussion. There are a couple of issues I want to raise and I want to just draw attention to. First of all, obviously we're walking away from this internal combustion engine in terms of personal automation, in terms of personal transport. But we cannot do that with air transport because we're dependent on the jet engine. Because we cannot go for long distances without a jet engine. So let me ask you a question. What is the status of algae fuels?
So you are right and wrong, if you allow me. We right now, 1 month ago, less than 1 month ago, in British Columbia, we had the first commercial aircraft flying electric. That was a float plane, very small one. And right now, we don't have that technology to put in the long haul because of the weight. Batteries weight a lot, you know, in a Tesla is 1 ton in 2.5 tons, but if the Tesla had to fly, that would be much, 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 much
But
more.
what kind of propulsion does it use?
Yes, we will be using still for the long haul, the fuel, liquid fuel, because it gives us the best energy combination and weight. And we are testing many feedstocks. You have highlighted algae, but algae is one in a sea of potential feedstocks that you have. Algae is progressing very well. Algae is a very good solution for countries, for example, that have, for example, Arab countries are very interested in algae because of the salty water, and they can then produce much easily. There are amazing facilities right now in the United Arab Emirates, and they are doing all the tests with algae. And the problem with algae and many other solutions is scaling up.
Yeah.
It goes down to the money. Yeah. So what we are doing, and in our global scheme for offsetting, for example, it's CORSIA. There is an R that is reduction. And that's the first policy that came out that says, airline, instead of buying an offset, you can also prove that you use a sustainable fuels, and there is proof for sustainability is a long run, and then you reduce. And that incentivizes the airlines to use sustainable fuels, which is then within aviation.
Jane, help us out here as we talk, and you told us to pull up this webpage.
Yeah.
What are we seeing here? Are we on the right page?
I don't know. I would have to go into the, and I don't have my.
See. All right.
I'm so sorry.
We will keep playing that.
Maybe it's better.
Okay.
You have a look, and then when you see something,
yes, you see all those little aircraft. Is it live?
Yes, it's live.
If you
right
focus in one, you'll see them even moving.
And if you click, from Stockholm to Newark.
You can click on them.
Does that have cooking oil in it? That flight?
This one, you would have them to go into the flight, and but probably SAS will be use cooking oil. Yeah.
Wow, that's
you have
amazing.
United. If you go to California, somewhere,
Yeah.
Click there. You have a United flight. Yeah.
This is fascinating. It's fascinating.
So
they're not
and
telling
you can
us.
follow each one of them, and there is, if I may, if you're really interested, there is the GIFAF, which is this global framework. We announce every single day, or as soon as it comes out, any new announcements on sustainable fuels. We need to scale up, because this is a good solution, but still the price parity is a problem. But you know, in the life cycle assessment, that can be 80% less
so
CO2,
Jane, take
guys.
a pause. DPM, Barbara, Marusha all want to talk to you. DPM, you start first. Go ahead. You, of course.
But, I think this is all okay, but again, we are discussing only technology. And we don't think about it, that at the moment, only a very minority of the population worldwide uses aircrafts. If the whole population worldwide would use air transportation that we are doing it today, then we have not only a climate problem, but the whole sky really completely congested. So it is also, again, important to think about the behavior. I give you one example. I don't know if it is, how it is in the rest of the world or in the United States, but I know what is happening in Europe. In Europe, with the low-cost companies that arrived, that creates a new demand in mobility by air. So now you have a new hype that had been developed everywhere in Europe. So young people, they say, okay, next weekend I will go shopping from Luxembourg to Milano, because it's hype to go to Milano to do their shopping. Because the aircraft ticket costs only 20 euros or 25 euros. So they take an aircraft to go to Milano to have a hype weekend and shop there. That's a behavior. That is not impossible. We cannot continue like this and thinking if we organize like this the transport or use the transport so that it can function at the end. So we must also question how we have organized the aviation sector, how we use it, and what would be maybe alternatives, or what on which kind of flights are not good. Because without this, I can assure you, no result.
You don't have to put your hand up. Just start talking to each other, everybody.
Let me go in there, if I may.
Yeah, keep going.
We're talking, I mean, the Deputy Prime Minister talk about a systemic transformation, a shock to the system. If we don't talk about how our financing mechanisms and our fiscal schemes are actually working, we are not going to shock that system. I mean, I could argue, are all levels of government actually empowered to invest, to actually change that behavior, and to actually do it without burdening the most vulnerable? Are we really looking into how we incorporate the externalities, the impact, the externalities of certain modes of transport in the way we price them? Are we actually favoring infrastructure projects that already incorporate in their ethos and their conceptualization money and space for walking and cycling? Are we understanding that it's not just about big infrastructure projects? Are we understanding that it's about enabling the access to local authorities and cities to certain financial schemes? I don't think we are. So my point would be that we need an absolute revolution of our financing schemes and our fiscal schemes if we really want to shock the system in the way we're being told.
I would like to go back to where François started, saying if we would do that globally. At the moment, we have been getting into a very industrialized country discussion, you know, because when you think about developing countries, about emerging economies, the discussion for them is not how to reduce sustainable modes. They are walking by about 40 to 50% in the urban context. Yeah. So there, I think there we should find ways to leapfrog, to come directly from, let's say, walking to electrified mobility. And I think the example of Chile, which is not a developing country but an emerging economy, was a very interesting one. But Chile still has, or not still, but has enough finance power to do that. So we should also try to find similar opportunities, or these leapfrogging opportunities, which are not in the sky but somewhere on Earth, to help or not to help these countries, to enable these countries to get there.
So it might be in the sky. And the only thing that I'm asking is for people to not take for granted that what you see right now with a low cost, and I fully agree, I think there is a huge behavior issue that I think each one individually has to look to its own footprint and do the balance. I think there are priorities the footprint should not be the only thing you are looking at. Being with your dad, if he's not okay, might be a big priority in your life. Think about that. So there are balances in life. But how about this low-cost airline now can go regional, and that's what Norway is doing in 2040. All regional flights will be electric. They are, and to the neighbors as well, up to a certain distance. Is it a bad thing that instead of going by train, you took an electric aircraft to go if it's less than the impact of the train, and you don't have, we are not even talking about land use, because there is land use change in every time that you put a new rail and a new road. So go back to the developing countries. So we have airports in the Amazon area in Brazil. You want to put roads and rails through the Amazon? There are a lot of circumstances that even your areas, the land use and everything, it's much more important than anything else. So air transport makes all the sense. So it's, for me, when I go to Africa, sometimes to go from A to B in Africa, I have to go back to Paris or Amsterdam or London, then to go to Africa again, because there's no connectivity. This is an absurd. It's a lot of pollution.
Anyone who's been to the continent of Africa knows that's so true. So you want to go, so I worked in Johannesburg, and I wanted to go to Burkina Faso. I flew to Paris, past Burkina Faso, and then all the way back to Burkina Faso. I took a novel and I finished it in that time.
Was the discussion,
it's outrageous.
Yeah. Was the discussion on mobility, accessibility, environment? We fully agree. We have to have a systematic look. And what we are doing right now, in terms of connectivity, don't tell people you cannot get connected. That is wrong to connect. Find ways for them to do that sustainably. Educate them for them to then address behavior in a way that you're balanced. There's so many services. And right now, we will be able as well to substitute many services that are air transport services with drones. We don't need more to put the doctor inside the plane with the heart in a box, and a drone brings it. We don't have any more to send an entire group from the UN. By the way, ICAO is part of the UN family. We support every time that there is disasters or not with the aviation bit. But now we put a drone. Let's say we have a compound that was attacked, bomb or something, there is damage there. It would take us 5 months to reconstruct. Now, I send a drone, I clear the airspace with the government, I send a drone, it measures the damage, take pictures, send it back to us. We put all the material, the plans, and a video on how to reconstruct. We send that back to them in less than a week. So nobody had to travel, there was not security issues anymore, etc. So guys, there is a lot of things that we'll have to think about the world again. We were talking about...
could be the answer, right?
And sidewalks. Think about sidewalks, because you'll be flying individually very soon.
We have 5 minutes left in this conversation, this part of the conversation, in the mitigation conversation. If you want to be in it, microphone there, I have only 5 minutes. Yes, go ahead.
I really don't agree at all what has been said, because the problem is, if you that's why my biggest fear also when I look at now at the window of opportunity that we have regarding climate change and all the issues of climate change, and especially the responsibility of the transport sector. If we think that we have only to change thermic motorization by electric motorization, all the problems we resolve, it's wrong. Look at what we have done. Look at how we organize our society, our cities. You know that in 2050, regarding the statistic and the figures of the United Nations, 70% of the population will live in big cities. So if you organize then mobility that we do it today in 2050, you can be assured these cities cannot function anymore. The quality of life will be below zero at these cities.
Below zero?
Below zero,
Yikes.
yeah. Because already today it's near zero. I don't want to live in a city like Los Angeles, where in the traffic hour you lose hours and hours in the congestion. And at the end you electrify the congestion. You electrify the problem, but the problem is not solved. So if you don't think about the system, you cannot find solutions.
Oh, this is such a great conversation. Okay. I know that the coffee break is going to be the most electrifying coffee break because I am going to come find all of you guys and we're going to keep the conversation going. Very quickly, I need a one-sentence question. Go ahead.
So my one-sentence question is to build... My name is Heather Allen, sorry.
Hi, Heather.
So it's to build on what Andrew started us off with when we're looking at new cities and the way we need to build them. And Maritza also said we need to revolutionize the way that we look at transport. In that way, is the current way we collect the data for our evidence base for the transport policies that we make fit for purpose for taking us to an equitable, low-carbon transport system by 2030?
Who feels best able to handle that one? That's a tough one. Barbara, you go ahead. And also, not only handle it, but handle it in, 1 minute.
In 1 minute, yeah.
Yeah.
No. So the shortest answer is no. To extend it a little bit is the data that we have are not harmonized across countries, which is particularly true for Europe. The data we have are not specific enough to know where people start, where people end, and they are not specific enough to know the needs. Because what we see in mobility data is only the outcome, how people are able to organize their activities. But maybe there are other needs behind that cannot be fulfilled by the mobility options they have.
Okay. Marusha, Jane.
Just absolutely emphasize the granularity of that data and how we are missing it, and also informal transport. It links to places in which informal livelihoods, informal economy is really what runs a country, and we don't have enough data on that informal transport.
Jane.
Just for aviation, we have all the data you need.
Jane is on fire today. All right.
But
thank you.
But do you have the data about access and egress to airplanes or to the airports? Because this is another problem, in particular in urban areas, how you get there and how you get out from there. And when I saw yesterday, there was a picture of an airport in Uganda, in Hoima, and there was this airport and only jungle around, and I was wondering, why? How do you get there?
By plane.
When you arrive, how do you get out?
See, this is why Jane suggested this by plane. She and her colleagues have jobs forever. All right. One thought, and it's in a sentence, because then it is the end of this mitigation conversation. Go ahead.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I'm Tilly de Bot. I lived for 17 years in New York, and New York is a very challenging city to just move around. It's interesting to see that even young people, every generation almost takes Ubers. And the congestion actually in New York City is tremendous. Public transportation, well, maybe the subway isn't working all that well, but it is a challenge. So my question is actually that changing behaviors can take generations. My question is, isn't the answer for transforming transportation much more focused on innovation, innovation, innovation?
Thank you
because
for that
that's
question.
maybe where the solution
Thank you for that
will
question.
lay. Thank you.
It's also a yes and no answer, and that's what we have time for. Marusha.
Yes, but with a purpose, and yes, and if it's social innovation, not just technological innovation. Just because we are short of time, I could go on.
Yes, yeah, of course. And we will, but outside of this particular forum.
I agree on this, and I would add to this that what is important to understand that investments, public investments in the infrastructure of the public transport is important, because we have a lack of investments. We had a lack of investments in the public transport that is enormous in the last 70 years.
Yeah, Jane, go ahead.
I think innovation is key, but again, I think in all the previous answers that we were giving, we were saying you need a balance, you need the regulatory framework, you need the systematic planning, and you need the innovation and technology. Yeah. I think it's all together, and the new realities. But she mentioned Uber. We'll have flying Ubers very soon, and guys, Uber was not there just a few years ago. It's
Jane,
a change in behavior as well.
Awesome, as are you, Marusha, Francoise, Barbara. This has been such a great conversation. There's a phrase in show business, always leave them wanting more. Oh my goodness, I want so much more. But for now, this is the plan, okay? I'm going to ask you to exit the stage. There will be huge applause. I will stand over there. I will talk to the Mayor of Sierra Leone. Plenary 4 Part 2 will then come and sit down. Your name tags will be there. No one will notice all of the choreography because it will be done so beautifully. But first of all, mitigation plenary speakers, Part 1 of Plenary 4. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. So, we are going to reset the stage, but also, what a pleasure. Sometimes technology can get it done, because we are going to talk to the Mayor of Sierra Leone. Hello, Madam Mayor, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And I'm Mayor of Freetown, which is the capital of Sierra Leone.
It is so nice to see you, Madam Mayor. Thank you so much for making time for us. We are moving on in our plenary, talking about adaptation and resilience. As Mayor of Freetown, Sierra Leone, how are you tackling that idea of adaptation and resilience to climate change? And also thinking about transporter too, as well.
Okay, thanks a lot, Femi. So with Freetown, just to give a little bit of context, probably our greatest challenge, which the city has faced in the last sort of 2 decades or so, has been the rapid rate of urbanization, which sadly has happened in a very unplanned manner with no building regulations and has resulted in massive deforestation. That is now combined with the effects of climate change, which are happening globally, best seen through or best understood in our context from extreme weather conditions. particularly heavy rainfall. And over the course of the period from 2013 to 2018, Freetown suffered massive flooding on a regular basis, with a particularly devastating incident on the 14th of August 2017, when we had the landslide, which many people are aware of, and 1,000 people died. So from the perspective of climate adaptation, what are we working on? What is it that we're responding to? We're principally responding to regular flooding caused both by the deforestation, but then also because we're part of a global world in which we are all experiencing these extreme weather conditions. With Transform Freetown, which is our 3-year plan for the transformation of the city, I've been the mayor for a year and 9 months now. With Transform Freetown, we have a particular focus on 4 clusters: environmental management, within resilience, the resilience cluster, human development, healthy city, and urban mobility. And that's where the transport comes in. Forgive me. The flooding impacts everything. It's been costing the city about $2.5 million a year, with the exception of that devastating one in 2017. But what we've seen with the plans of Transform Freetown is that we can adapt and we can address. A simple low-hanging fruit that we introduced in 2018 as soon as I came into office was the flood mitigation, really in a very technical, with engineers, very precise way, following the water courses, seeing where blockages were during the dry season, by talking to communities. People talked about behavior earlier on and the engagement of communities, getting them to show us where the problems were and unlocking those problems. So we had no flooding in 2018. But in 2019, on the 2nd of August, just gone by, there was 173 millimeters of rain in 3 hours. There was flooding, but it receded very quickly because of the work that was done. So that's low-hanging fruit. More sustainably, or not even more sustainably, but on a sort of longer-term, medium-term basis, as a city, we're working on introducing improved stormwater drainage, which has been very, very much missing. Also in building, improving culverts, bridges, and so forth. Because from a transport perspective, the immediate effect from these floods is the disruption to transport links.
Madam Mayor, Madam Mayor, I'm just wondering what lessons that you can teach us then, as we're looking about adaptation and resilience. Is it something that is beyond? It's not necessarily about the transport, perhaps. What are the lessons that you can share as a mayor? Because people come to the mayor and say, I couldn't get to work today, or I couldn't pick up my kids today, or I couldn't get to the market today. So what are those lessons that you can teach us?
Okay, so I think that the lesson is there are 2 things I would say. One, that it's about a holistic solution, and in the discussion earlier on that came across, it's not, transport doesn't sit on its own. Transport is an enabler, and transport is also affected. So we have a comprehensive solution to addressing these challenges, because what you want to get at the heart of is not only how do you reduce the flooding. So we've just launched on the 3rd of this month, Freetown the Tree Town. It's a campaign to plant 1 million trees in 2020, which is going to speak to that deforestation. I've already mentioned the fact that we're bringing in stormwater drainage and the bridges and so forth. But specifically on transportation, we have not just adaptation. Even for a small country like ours, we also have the role that we play when it comes to climate change.
Oh, I'm glad you said that.
Affecting.
How do you travel around Freetown, Madam Mayor?
Personally, I travel in a vehicle at the moment, but I'm just coming on to what it is we're wanting to do.
Okay, go ahead.
And many people, and that is precisely the point I was just about to make. And I travel in a vehicle, but the vast majority of people walk. And many, not the vast majority, I would say the vast majority of people move in 2-wheelers and 3-wheelers, which creates a lot of congestion. So we have the motorcycles known as okadas, we have the 3-wheelers, many people call them tuk-tuks, they're called kekes here, but they congest the road. In addition, we have typically vehicles that are 20 years old. So we also have a problem with air quality, and we have a problem with our own contribution to carbon, which is really driven by having inefficient transport solutions. So when you have heavy flooding, that is, I've literally watched kekes floating and people floating in them as the rains have come down heavily. What we're looking to do is to address, our congestion problem, which is our main contribution to sort of climate change, but it also helps us with our climate adaptation. We're introducing a cable car. And I know that for many parts of the world, it's still kind of looked at like, that's a bit exotic.
Yeah, my face just did that. My face like, what? A cable car?
No.
But maybe that's
to a few of the mayors.
Yeah, but maybe that was also a way to get tourism as well. Perhaps are you thinking like that?
Tourism would be a nice add-on. But it is actually our way of introducing mass transit.
Yeah.
And there was something that was mentioned before, which is somebody was talking about the people and the role of people and the infrastructure. We've got a situation where I've already said rapid urbanization means that our city is overpopulated. It was poorly planned. In fact, it wasn't planned. So in order for us to introduce mass transit, we're looking at cost-effective solutions which are also environmentally friendly. We can't put in a big railway station. We can't do, even bus transit is challenging because of the limited road space. So going up is actually the innovation that we're pursuing.
Right. We have to wrap up. We have to wrap up now, Madam Mayor. So out of everything in your notes, in your notebook, what is the most important thing you want to tell us as a wrap-up thought?
I want to say that it's not just about the technology, it's very much about the people. So in as much as we're doing cable cars, we are also working on reducing congestion by building more markets to get street traders off the roads. We're working on zonal plans, introducing a master plan for the city. We're working on slum upgrades, which will make moving around in low, informal communities easier. So again, it's as I started, a holistic approach. And for us who are working in the developing world context, you're looking not just at high-tech solutions, but things that touch people's everyday lives and make transportation easier, more sustainable and greener.
Thank you so much. Yvonne Aki-Sawyer, Mayor of Freetown in Sierra Leone. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So we continue. This is the part 2 of our conversation about climate action, climate change, transportation, but we're really looking at adaptation and resilience for this second part. We looked at mitigation and now adaptation and resilience. It's really good to see all of you. I'm just going to get all of you to introduce yourselves to our audience. Amin, you go ahead.
Thank you, Femi. My name is Amin Subukti. I'm now the Chief Advisor to the Governors of DKI Jakarta, the capital city of Indonesia. My job is basically helping the governors in translating a political vision into the policy, strategy, program, as well as ensuring that all of them, the delivery of them actually happen in the best interest of the city, the citizen, as well as the planet.
All right, well, it's good to have you here. Nalu, tell everybody who you are. What do you do?
Thank you, Femi. Aloha, everyone. My name is Ngalman Mana Tatialuititi Agnes Tutuvan Shoga. I am the Chief Executive Officer of the Land Transport Authority in Samoa. If you don't know where Samoa is, please Google it now. You may wonder why I have such a long name, but it is, our names are very important, and it is linked to our land. And Samoa is one of the Pacific Island countries. We're in very much a lot of danger with, the sea level rise. So we're losing our land bit by bit due to climate change. So I guess I'll be bringing the perspective of our Pacific Island countries to this forum.
Yeah, it's not a what do we do in the future. You are living the experience right now.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Hello, Oscar. Good morning.
Good morning, Femi. Good morning, all. My name is Oscar de Buen. I come here representing the World Road Association. I was past president of the association, and the idea is for me to tell you about what the association, which is a knowledge-sharing organization with 120 members, 124 member countries in all over the world, what we are doing in terms of adapting the road network in order to provide year-round access for everyone wherever the road networks reach. I was also a vice minister of infrastructure in Mexico, and I am currently working at a private equity fund.
Habtamu, it's nice to see you. Good morning. Tell everybody who you are.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Femi, and good morning. My name is Habtamu. I'm from Ethiopia. My educational background is civil engineering and construction management. I was involved in transport sector since the last 15 years, particularly in road sector. So I was serving the nation in different capacities, and now I am Director General for Ethiopian Roads Authority. Thank you very much.
Everybody's very welcome. Thank you so much. Whenever you have questions, do not wait for me to ask whenever you have questions. The microphones are there. I will see you, and then I'm going to wrap your conversation into this one as well, because we're all talking together. Nalu, what did you write down there? Because now I'm going to start with you.
Thank you.
Did you write down, why am I here?
Yes, I did. I guess with the, like I said in my introduction, our country as well as our neighboring islands in the Pacific Islands, we're facing a lot of challenges at the moment with the sea level rise. Much of our roads in Samoa, they lie along the coastline, and so we've had to build them higher. And we've had to build more seawalls and upgrade a lot of our drainages. And before, we never used to, I guess, put much importance on building inland roads. But now we do, because we have no choice. Because our, you know, our coastlines are suffering a lot from the sea level rise. Even with our water supply, majority of, sometimes with some villages, we have to drill borehole drills, drilling to get their water, but their water supply have got a bit contaminated with the sea seeping into underground.
Is this emergency work that you're now doing? Because everybody else is, in other parts of the world where they're seeing climate change, but it's not as physical as you're experiencing it. Is this almost like it's a crisis adaptation you're doing? Yes,
that's right. So again, with Land Transport Authority, we manage all the roading infrastructure in Samoa. So, you know, 2 years ago, I'll give you an example. 2 years ago, I never used to get many calls to respond to landslides. Now, you know, there's possible 2 or 3 landslides per year that we suffered, and you know, just a few years ago we never used to have that. So yeah, it's crisis mode, and so our country has to work a little bit faster than every other country in order to put in adaptation strategy as well as implement adaptation works.
Yeah, normally I think that what we're hearing from Samoa is, I would say, the standard all over the world, because normally you respond to an emergency. You respond to the effects of a storm or a flooding or something that takes you to, well, generates the need to react to that and to reestablish communications so that you can really provide access to where it was interrupted. However, now the approach is changing, because this is becoming so common in a lot of places, in a lot of countries, that you have to be prepared in order to be able, A, to respond to an emergency if it happens, or B, to avoid that the consequences of this emergency are as serious as they could be if you took no action. So the change in emphasis is moving from correcting to preventing. And there is not only a question of being able to minimize the effects of storms and climatological events, but also lowering the cost. If you compare the cost of an adaptation measure with the cost of a corrective measure, it's there's a huge difference between one and the other. So part of the issue is changing the culture of road authorities, of road managers, so that they can prevent instead of correct.
Nalu, I know you had a thought there. Pick up the microphone on the table. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. You wrote something down. Tell me what you wrote down. I can't bear it. You can't write in front of me and not tell me. Go ahead. It's not fair. You demand to know.
Yeah, I was just jotting down Oscar's point on corrective and preventative measures, and he is right. While we have to deal with the crisis at hand, we have a lot of we gain a lot of lessons learned in order to better prepare us in the future. But like I said, we are in that crisis mode right now, so we don't have that much time to prepare. We just have to work a bit faster and work alongside very well with all our other agencies and stakeholders involved.
It's almost as if Jakarta knew that we were having TT20 and planned to give us an example so that Amin could have point 1, point 2, point 3 about what the situation is, how do we deal with it, and then how do we look at it in the future. I'm not going to ask you to do all of that right now, but you are going to be using your own home example of Jakarta. Can you explain to the audience who may not be following the news what's happening to Jakarta?
Yeah, I think this, just to echo what Galir mentioned before, the cost of failures in adapting to the climate change is quite costly. It's only recently, by the 1st of January, while everybody is basically enjoying the firework, actually we are enjoying the rainfall. So the 24-hour rainfall with the totals of the rain is actually almost 4 meters, actually 377 millimeters a day, which is very, very big to Jakarta. This is the biggest rainfall in the last 154 years, so it's quite affecting us. And the cost is quite huge, actually. The cost is quite huge, including in the transportation. So, for example, 14% of the transportation route is basically affected. One secondary airport was even collapsed for a day. It's quite significant effect to us. And this is again in a different route of course. I mean, in Jakarta, the route of course is, of course, beside the climate change is also in terms of the land subsidence, because of the extracting the water from is too much, actually. That's the situation.
I mean, it's really interesting because so many of our plenaries over the last couple of days have talked about changing behaviour. And so for Jakarta and flooding, I mean, this is an annual situation. At what point do you then say we need to do something and adapt and have more resilience in our way that we're dealing with transport and also just everyday life? Why is it that we're 2020 and you're thinking about resilience now?
Yeah, that's a very relevant question. When we are talking about changing behavior, we even talk about that since yesterday until also this morning. First is in terms of the land use. Jakarta, the way Jakarta grow is basically through urban sprawling mode. So actually people living across from the central city to the out of the city. This makes the space for the water reservoir is getting very, very limited. So our open green zone, for example, is now limited only 10%. So it's very difficult for us to actually, when there is a big rainfall, and then to make the waters becoming manageable. So what we are trying to do is actually, and from the transportation point of view, this causes people more and more are using private transportation. Now, 80% of the commuter are basically using private transportation. This is something that we want to change. In the futures, we want to change the behavior of people so that more and more people are using the public transportation.
Well, how do you do that? Are you going to make public transportation free?
No.
That would do it.
No.
How do you change behavior? What's the incentive?
Look at this. This is how Jakarta is look like. How do I press this? On the left side, This is Jakarta map using the current models with the low structural density. So for example, if apply Manhattan type of density, actually Jakarta is only those small, only one-fourth. As well as we apply the Singaporean rule in terms of the density, Jakarta should not be that big. Because of that, problem of urban sprawling. So we need to basically create more and more private transportation. We try to make it more congested by having more and more people living within walking distance of the train station, bus station, and those kind of things.
Okay. Habtami, we're going to look at Ethiopia and the rural roads system. And can you tell me why that you would need to have adaptation and resilience for rural roads for Ethiopia? Paint the picture for us. Help us understand.
Okay, thank you so much. So I think the most important effects of climate change are drought, El Nino, flooding, landslides, and cyclones. So for Ethiopia, particularly for East Africa, drought is prominent because of this climate change. For us, I think that is the most important. The way we approach this is through increasing connectivity of the lowest possible administrative level, the so-called Kabale levels. So since 2010, we tried to manage, to formulate a program where we can connect these lowest administrative levels so that transportation could be possible, so that food price could be possibly be transported, so children malnutrition could be managed. So I think this is a very a good success and achievement in that in the last, from 2010 to 2017, we tried to construct lowest level engineered roads of 56,000 in 7 years. That is almost 8,000 per year. And that has created resilience for drought cases, enhancing the mobility. Also, it has enhanced productivity of the agriculture, that they can easily mobilize the technology and also agricultural inputs. They can also sell products. So that was very much instrumental for us for climate adaptation, climate shocks.
Oscar, I know one of the points that you really wanted to make very clear are the benefits of climate adaptation, which once everybody's spoken about them, it seems obvious. But what was the point that you particularly wanted to drive home?
Well, I think the key, and related to the last question, is access. Because in most countries, no matter how you move, whether you ride a bike, whether you walk, whether you ride the bus, whether you use your vehicle, you need a road to have access to wide areas of the country. So if you have a resilient road system, if you have resilient roads, you will have access and you will ensure that people can go about doing whatever they want to do or they need to do. So, and in particular, in remote areas or areas that are not easily accessible, it's key to have a workable road or a workable path that you can use in order to walk or bike. So I think that the most important benefit of having a resilient road network is to have access and to allow everyday life to go on as it should proceed. If you lose that because of climatological events or whatever, then your everyday life will be disrupted and you will have a lot of, well, negative effects that you don't want to have.
I'm just wondering, Amin, in terms of what happens next for Jakarta, what is the plan? Is there a huge plan about we have to do this and this and this, and then we're not going to have these major issues with flooding anymore? Are people genuinely focusing on resilience?
Yes. First of all, I mean, I'm trying to respond on what Oscar mentioned before, between, in particular on the roads. Yeah? Roads probably is more suitable for the remote area, but in a commuter type of city like Jakarta, actually the most effective mode of transportation that we think is actually the rail-based transportation. Roads even created problem because of people are mostly using the private transportation, which may create also the congestions. And then that's one point. The second point is actually what we are going to do in the future is actually make the best use of the land. So we want to create more spacious land actually to be the reservoir for water, and then provide kind of incentive and disincentive for people not to be, for people, so that people actually in the crowd of the station or public transportation. For example, if in the past you are able to build a tall building, a skyscraper, if you are in near to the widening road. But now the policy in Jakarta is actually the reverse. We reverse the policy. If you have access within walking distance to the transportation point, we, the government, then provide incentive for you to invest more, and even to have lesser tax, and even to have any kind of investment that the investors want to do. So that's the way to make the congestion actually happen in the crowd happen in near transportation point, so that there is more spacious spacious zone can be used for the water reservation. We are very ambitious in doing that. How to the second slide, if I may.
Just keep talking. When it turns up, you can carry
This is the plan for expanding our transportation. So we are now having 16 kilometers of metro railway, and then we are expanding to more than 200 kilometers. The light rapid transportation, we are also very ambitious of having more than 100 kilometers, and so on. We want to also expand the coverage of the clean water, that currently only 60% to become 100%, etc. That's one way actually to change behavior and then to make the people are more resilient toward the flooding in Jakarta.
Any thoughts, any questions, any comments? Do go to the microphones. I'm going to be starting folding in your questions there. Haptamu, I'm just wondering, I'm not hearing from the people who are in the rural areas. What are they saying to you? Because it's really good to get that, that feedback from them. What are they asking for?
By the way, adaptation and resilience is not a very simple thing. It's very difficult. It's almost disaster management. I think it has to be thought together with mitigation. Like, you know, Ethiopia, for example, has this green economy policy that the energy sector is completely free from this fuel, this hydropower and solar. Also, these tree plantations, you remember this summer, 4 billion tree plantation initiated by Ethiopian Prime Minister. So resilience and adaptation has to go together with mitigation. It's not. It's very expensive to rehabilitate after disaster happens. Anyway, for our drought cases, we had a very bad story of drought in 1985. Also in recently in 2015-16. We tried to compare. We had conducted a study together with the World Bank on impacts of this road network enhancement. So I think we pretty managed it good, very well, with the latest El Nino effect. So people are very happy on that one. Still, we should try to connect these 4,000 cables again, which are again going to be constructed. The issue of Jakarta and Ethiopia is different. Ethiopia, this is a rural society, which is very far from towns, and you know. So we are trying to make better access and connectivity, giving opportunity for market and also for social issues, so that they can more adapt for these climate shocks. Yeah.
Nalu, is the idea of resilient roads, is it just now you're building them inland rather than on, is that what makes them resilient for you?
Yes and no. I guess in resilient in a way that if we build, building inland roads is only one factor. I think I just wanted to add on to the conversation. While it is important to build resilient roads and resilient infrastructure, but it is of equal importance to build the capacity of our people, to also the skill set of our people to maintain these infrastructure. And we are grateful for the World Bank as well as other donor agencies for funding the upgrading as well as construction of key bridges and roads in Samoa. But the key message of our government is to our donors is also to build a procurement framework that also promotes the use of our local skills and our local people so that they are able to maintain the infrastructure after construction.
I want to add on the point of involving people into the this kind of issues. I mentioned about the biggest flooding in Jakarta in 154, but actually if we are talking about also the recovery process, the flooding in the 1st of January was the quickest when we are talking about the recovery, because it's only took 4 days to make everything resettle. It's dried off within 4 days. Why this happened? Because of the collaborative approach. The resilience and the adaptation should not be treated only as a business of government, but also is the business of everybody. Like in the case of Jakarta, we involve non-governmental society, and also we involve the technology provider like Uber in here, but there is also very famous technology provider in Jakarta, Gojek. And their role is encompass the area of start from the evacuation, logistic, health, and then also managing the social impact, including kind of the trauma healing.
I would like to go back to the question of how to improve the resilience of infrastructure. And well, the fact is that you have today, even in developing countries, very ample or very wide-ranging transportation or road systems that were built with different standards in the past. So now the question is not so much how to build a new resilient infrastructure, but rather how to adapt the existing infrastructure and how to do it in a way that is meaningful and that can be cost-effective given the resources that you have. So for that, I think that thinking about priorities, thinking about ways of organizing the effort that needs to be done, looking at ways in which you can increase the impact, the social impact of these resilience improving measures, that is going to become more and more relevant as we go along. And I think it would be a good thing to think about how to support those kinds of efforts, how to support financially, technically, with new ideas, new concepts that would allow countries, and specifically countries that are in very vulnerable regions of the world, to move faster and move farther ahead on this front. Otherwise, I think that we will keep looking at tragedies where infrastructure is profoundly disrupted because of climate events.
I see synergy between all of you. So now, ask somebody on this plenary a question.
Why do I get to do this? I guess we'll ask my brother here from Jakarta. I mean, of course, you know, I see many initiatives been implemented in your country. If there's anything that you have done successfully in your country that we could possibly use back home.
Excellent question.
Well, there are a number of issues, of course. I mean, you experience the climate change that impact on the island. We also have an issue of land subsidence. Land subsidence is quite severe in Jakarta due to water extraction. And then this causes us, you know, danger, like when there is a tidal effect of from the coastal line. So we build also resilience by having a defense to those kind of tidals. So that's might be something also useful for you. And then the second one I mentioned about the need to have participation from the people, to have everybody on the table. International partner also is very important. Exchange knowledge from other areas to our home country is important. Local people also to be participated in both on the prevention as well as if things or shock happen, actually they should also be part of the movement to make things, recovery is becoming a lot faster.
Habtamu, ask one of your co-panelists a question.
I don't have a question anyway.
Yes, you do. You do have a question. You cannot be on this plenary without having a question for one of your fellow panelists. There is a connection between all of you.
Yeah, I think the nature of the vulnerability, the issue of this adaptation for climate change is different. My case is different, and the case in Jakarta is different. So I think it's very difficult to say something on whichever you are.
So you don't see that as you're doing adaptation and resilience, you don't see that there's an issue with changing behavior, with the finance. I'm prompting you here. I'm helping you out a little bit. I know you've got a better question than I have. Go for it.
I have a question. I have a comment, not for the plenary. So, I think the way I say it is very important for developing countries where they don't have sufficient connectivity. For example, for Ethiopian case, 56,000 kilometers engineered roads. Always the roads is not easy. This is a huge achievement, but still we found a problem for finance. By the way, this will create job opportunity for women, for youth. Also, this was made through involving around 1,000 consultants and contractors, small-scale contractors. So if finance could be mobilized and still keeping on connecting these cable labels through involving development partners like World Bank, this is, I think, a huge achievement in terms of reducing the effect of climate change. The issue of finance is a huge challenge when we think of such kind of things.
Challenge for you, Nalu? Finance? I think at this point, everyone's just going to be throwing money at you. It's like, when the coastal roads don't exist anymore. But is it too... It can never be too late because this is your home.
Yes.
But talk to us about finance.
So with our financing of our roads, our majority, we earn our own revenue from our vehicle registration, driver's licensing, as well as a grant from government. But of course, again, our development partners play a huge role. With the building of large infrastructure is too much for our own local budget to fund. So we are thankful for them to helping us out.
And well, I think finance is always a challenge, no matter where you are, no matter what you do. In transportation, for example, you always need to build new things, to maintain existing ones, to improve whatever you have. And no matter whether you are in a developed country or in a developing country, the needs always are greater than what you can actually accomplish. So I think that more than, well, we should discuss financing options and all that. But at the same time, it's important to make sure that whatever money is available, you can apply to the most effective and the most, well, you get the most return on investment so that you have the most effective solutions. And in order for you to be able to do that, you have to have a priority setting process, a discussion process, a consultation process that allows you to make the best decisions from an overall point of view. And I think that's also an indirect but very present challenge in all these measures that we have to come up with, because they are in addition to what traditionally has been needed in these infrastructure fields, construction, maintaining, improving. So how to do that, I think that's an ongoing discussion.
I want to come back to this idea of changing behavior and how you do that. Nalu, can you explain to me how you do that? Because it's really hard. It takes a long time.
Yeah, so I'll share a personal story. So growing up, growing up in a village called Vayala in Samoa, and we used to go for a swim on the beach. It was right along the beach, so it was a lot of sand, and we'll go for a swim every week. Now, if you go to that village now, because of the sea level rise, there's literally no more beach. It's just a seawall, a whole lot of concrete, and then there's the sea there. And you know, I'm sharing this personal story because what I was able to do as leisure every day when I was young, I can't share that with my children. So that just, you know, overall in our country, I mentioned most of our people are starting to move inland, and a lot of the requests that come from our people is access roads that go inland. So I guess, you know, aligns well with work with Ethiopia that's doing. So yeah, and you know, they will request access road so they'll be able to go inland. Yeah, and then of course the water and our electricity have to follow. So some of the behavior of our people that have had to change, have no choice.
So it's not even trying to get them to change, it's just that nature is ahead of them. They're just like, there's no option there.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
I have an example on how Jakarta changing the behavior of the society. Just 2 days ago, we received an award from ITDP on the improvement of public transportation. It's actually by having the reverse paradigm of people doing the transportation. If in the past, the first priority is actually the private transportation, and then public transportation, and then non-emission transportation, and then walking. And now in Jakarta, we try to reverse it. So the first priority should be walking, and the second one in non-emission vehicles like bicycles and also non-emission type of motorcycle. But then after that, public transport, and then private transport, it would be the least. How is it done in the context of Jakarta? It's basically simply by providing the facility for people to walk more. The difficulties in the past is because Jakarta is in the equator, so it's a tropical country. It's not easy for you to basically walk. But then by having micro infrastructure to support that, and then people change their behavior.
How do you get around Jakarta the most? How do you get around Jakarta?
Yeah, well, yes.
What I'm asking you is, I am calling you on this policy of changing behavior. How is your behavior changing? Or are you just telling other people to walk and you're going in your AC? Who knows?
No.
I just surmise.
Combine, of course.
Combined, of
Yes.
course.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Good morning.
That's on. Hi, my name is Jim Reichert. I am a senior infrastructure specialist in Central Asia, China, and Mongolia at the moment. I want to give a shout out to TT. We used to work together some time back, and good to see you again. So I've got a general question, and I'd like to sort of follow up with a specific example on Samoa, if I might. So there are several measures that can be and are being taken to increase the resilience of existing infrastructure. But there may become a point where that no longer works and you have to think about a plan B. So the general question is there any sort of thinking there in terms of when is it no longer sufficient to continue to take resilient measures on certain assets and you just have to go to a plan B, abandon it or go to a second option? Now, the specific example is Samoa. The coastal road that TD started with, it is critical importance. It is, the vast majority of people live within a kilometer of that road. It connects the commercial center of Apia with the international airport, with the principal country's seaport. It lies in some cases within 10 meters of the coast, and it is at sea level in some locations. So you're talking about taking resilient measures to improve that asset. Elevating low spots, improving the drainage system to accommodate greater throughput with water. So the question is...
What the question was again, I'm missing the question.
So the question is, in Samoa, at some point, the measures they are currently taking may not be sufficient to maintain that asset on the coast. So what other measures might you be considering now, such as possibly relocating it inland further?
It sounds like you're answering your own question, so you should probably pause now and then ask.
Fair enough.
All right.
So the general
unless you want to tell us, and then that's fine.
The general question then for everybody would be, at what point is the thinking? When is it you can no longer put money into creating more resilient infrastructure in their existing locations? And then when do you move to a plan B, say?
All right. When is plan B? Right.
Thanks, Jim. Good to see you again. Yes, I think the option of Samoa relocating to a different island is a no option at this point in time. Like I said, with you know, our land is our identity, so we will at this point in time is just working on moving inland and just making our key roading infrastructure resilient for the time being. I'm sure we have a bit more time.
Oscar, I mean, this is basically a really miserable question. At what point do you think we have to just ditch plan A and go to a plan B? It's really a negative question, really.
Yeah, well, I think that at the current time, trying to respond in a general way to the question that was asked is, I think that there is no plan B so far in most places. And it's part of a cultural question. I mean, we have started talking about resilience a few years ago, and now we will have to start thinking about plans B, which will definitely be very different in Samoa than in Jakarta or in Ethiopia or in Bolivia. So I think that as we go along, there will be a need probably to ask this question in meaningful ways that reflect each country's situation, but that will be part of a cultural change.
Just very quickly, I mean, does Jakarta have a plan B? Is there a worst case scenario and then you just go, oh my goodness, what are we going to do?
If we are talking about flooding, for example, we experienced flooding actually since the 19th century, but the urbanization level keep growing. So actually Jakarta still be the attraction point for the Indonesian. Well, economic-wise, for example, it's might only have 0.0% of the total area of Indonesia, but in terms of the economy, it consists of 25% of total GDP. So that shows that how the Jakarta being the attraction also of everybody. But recently, some of you may aware that there is a initial plan from the central government to move the capital city to the central Kalimantan.
Okay. Thank you so much, Plenary 4A, Plenary 4B, although there is no plan B. All right. I really appreciate it. I want to just check in with our audience because we're going to do the poll Ev again. So let's just throw that up. You two can play as well. So we're going to do the poll Ev because the poll is, and let me just remind you how you actually get to it. Just checking in on how much you know about transport sector's share of global greenhouse gas emissions. And in order to get there, you just go to your phone and go to pollev.com/TT2020. You are way ahead of me. Transport sector's share of global greenhouse gas emissions. Is it 1, 6%, 2, 16%, 3, 26%, 4, 36%, or 5, 46%? Oscar, what do you think? What would you say, Oscar?
I was distracted. But maybe 48. Well,
Oscar says 46. Amin, what would you say? Oh, we're getting some guesses from the audience. That's giving you a clue because I guess it's. Amin, what would you say?
40% probably.
Yeah, okay. Habtamu, what would you say?
I think I heard it's 14%.
Yeah, you may have heard that. I don't know if that's the right answer. Nalu, what would you say? All right, the correct answer, let me put you out of your agony so you can enjoy your coffee break, is 16%. Okay, congratulations to the 21% who got it right. You can have extra coffee. The rest of you need to talk more. Thank you very much, Plenary B. We really appreciate you. I will see you later on in the day. Enjoy the rest of your program and the breakout sessions. Thank you.